Quintin, it is amazing to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been following the show. You've had some amazing speakers on, so really grateful to be here. And just a little additional on myself. So as you kind of mentioned, I've been in product marketing or sales enablement role for almost a decade now. So I've seen a lot of different things there, lots of different, all of the ins and outs of it across multiple different companies, more enterprisey all the way down to now under a 100-employee startup in AI. So I've seen it on all fronts, but really passionate about PMM, super excited to be here, and really passionate about how PMM plays such a critical middle role in a company between what you're building and how you're selling it. So really excited to talk about all of that today.
I love that. So just as a sneak preview for some of our guests, not only will we talk about this awesome case study, but just given, Quintin, your unique background and kind of, places you've served, I'm going to try to also cover just the experience of being a founding PMM and then also being a founding PMM at an AI native company where that is such a buzzword in and of itself. And there is such a mixture of hope and excitement and maybe a little bit of distrust with all this AI talk. So I want to try to squeeze all that into this conversation as well.
Awesome.
So without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so you are currently at Unify, and I want to come back to Unify and your time there. But today's case study is actually about another startup you worked at, and that was CaptivateIQ. So give us a quick summary for those who may not know. What is CaptivateIQ? What's kind of the main service offering?
Awesome. Yeah. So when I joined, or at the time I joined, as simple as possible, CaptivateIQ was commissioned software. So what it did was commissions, obviously often a back office function for incentives. So paying out your sellers based on how they perform, often run in spreadsheets, but it can be highly inaccurate and also can be a strategic driver for your business. So it's a really important function that's often overlooked and no great tools for it. So CaptivateIQ was one of the fastest growing in that, displacing spreadsheets and really bringing on a lot of startup early stage brands to their commissions platform. So now they've even branched further into the sales planning world and into this broader category of sales performance management for folks familiar with that space. But that's really what CaptivateIQ is. So
I love that. And it's very helpful as we start to think about what this case study is going to look like, because I imagine we're going to get into your particular persona and, what things were resonating with, mid-market versus upmarket segments. So, okay. Now thinking more closely on CaptivateIQ, tell us more about what the situation was like, when you started there. Obviously, we're talking about moving up market, but maybe right before that became a priority. What was going on and what led to that?
So a little bit about my background. So when I joined CaptivateIQ, I was hired as the founding PMM. I believe I was the fourth person on the marketing team, and they were just seeing a ton of success. I came in right before the Series C. They were going to raise $100 million and just over $1 billion valuation. So unicorn status, had the New York Stock Exchange billboard, really exciting moment for the company. And really that critical juncture in growth, right? Where they'd seen a ton of traction with kind of lookalike hot startups in the SaaS space at the time. I think this was a 2021, I want to say at the time. But just a lot of they had folks like Gong, who was a fast growing up and coming SaaS player that they'd had from the beginning, and similar type these smaller but really hyper growth SaaS companies that they'd grown well with, seen success.
Kind of like go-to-market darlings, that space was getting really hot, I feel in that time. It's still actually a very attractive space to be in.
100%. So they were one of the hot players at the time who was working with other folks at similar stage and seeing a lot of success as they grew out their go-to-market organization and naturally needed to stand up at scale commissions plans really quickly. So that was proving out really well, selling a lot. But as they were maturing into this really established, more mid-market and kind of cross the chasm, classically moving into those large scale buyers, they were looking to really build out a more robust both marketing function, sales function, and really just across the business. So that was really the point at which I came in and kind of that strategic juncture for the business.
Yeah. Okay. So the company's at this really exciting moment, and it was both of natural progression for the company, but there were also a lot of market signals that there was appetite that maybe started and just easier to capture in this enterprise, or I'm sorry, in this mid market and SMB segment. But you start to see signals that, okay, now enterprises are catching on. It's so funny. I feel like enterprises, while they have the biggest budgets and biggest teams, they're actually sometimes slower to pick up on the innovations, right? So what was actually then going on? Like, what was the actual business challenge that you personally became tasked with then?
Yeah, so and it was funny. We'd obviously, in addition with some of the traction we're seeing, like there were a few logos that had come through the door that were like, oh wow, we're actually unlocking value for this really large scale company, like whether that be in SaaS or even some of the like adjacent, more like tech forward companies and non SaaS industries. And we're just like, as I think you just get like shiny object syndrome in a company when you see like, oh my God, like we've been selling, 30 ARR deals and we just sold the 200K. What if we just sold 10 of these and we can meet all of these different things? So the business starts to get really, everyone gets a little bit, not distracted, but opportunistic when that shows up naturally. So when that started happening and we like even identified like early on that was like, there was some like a key proponent of our product was that we're like highly flexible. We're almost similar to a spreadsheet where you could really build anything. And that was like highly valuable for enterprises on the space. So like that was another thing that we're like, okay, there's probably something here that we could lean into. But it wasn't necessarily like, okay, like intentional move up market. It was more like, okay, how do we replicate these like 200K deals or like this 600K deal we almost won like last year based on that loved us, but just we didn't have this one feature and really like turn this into like, what if we put intentional dollars, effort, like marketing, focus, enablement all towards this thing and sprint at this and what could happen? So that was really the task at hand is like, hey, can we like make this repeatable and like actually go find more of these? So that's where we're at.
I love that. And I want to double click on something you said. You mentioned a lot of things, but one of the things in your list that you mentioned, and in addition to obviously like resources, but focus on something like this. And the reason why I know that sounds really trite, but the reason why I want to double click on this is because I have seen, as you pointed out, organizations get really excited about chasing the shiny object, but you're still trying to maintain everything else. And when, especially for a startup, when you're spread too thin like that, you lose focus. So it sounds like you were very intentional about, no, this is the strategy we're going to try to make repeatable. So let's go after that. So where did you start, I guess, with all that? What's kind of the first thing that you did?
Yeah, and that's such a like good observation. I think that's so easy to get like distracted and there needs to be like intentionality in that like push. It can't be like an outlier thing where like, oh, 3 months later this customer is churning because we realized we weren't cut out for this, right? Like that was not what we were like seeing out of the gates. And I think like that would have been like a full mistake if that had been the case. And like that's often times probably what happens. Like some companies and just products are really well fit and can like achieve like massive scale selling to SMBs and being this really user forward, self-serve, like fast, lower ARR companies. So at the time, like we were looking into that, but like what was like those first steps we took? One fortunate thing that we had is like we had already a really, as our PMM team, we had a strong win-loss motion set up, which if for any of the PMMs listening, like win-loss can be one of the most strategic and valuable programs you can build out at any company. Like the insights you get from them, I think like the challenge with win-loss is like, it feels like a nice to have oftentimes where it's just like this, and it's not on fire, right? It's just like a thing you could add as like, it's like a vitamin versus like, like a painkiller, with the business, but it has such a strategic impact when it's done right. And we really like invested in that early. So we're able to like use not only that program, which gives you a lot of like qualitative insights from like these 30-minute interviews that we'd had with a one-off with the close one and close loss champions that we talked to. In addition to that, we're running like, and this was pre like real like strong AI or like wide AI adoption. So I was building like pivot tables and spreadsheets of like, okay, for all of our closed won or closed lost, like for the deals we won in enterprise, what industry were they in? Which personas were we winning with? Which incumbent solutions were they on? And kind of looking at these slices of the market and seeing, oh, okay, where are there like wedges or like things that were like, oh, this is like a unique insight. That's surprising. Like this is like very unique based on like goes against what we like had previously understood or like how we have sold historically. So that really allowed us to like really start devising a strategy based on like those insights we're in like turning over rocks with those like quant analysis in advance of this, which can like really guide the strategy. So that's where we really started on that front.
I love that. I have to echo the value in a good win-loss program. That is where we have unlocked so many unique opportunities at multiple organizations that I personally have worked at. And I know we're going to talk about AI. I know we're going to talk about it, but I just have to say really quickly, there is some value in not outsourcing everything, every part of your analysis to AI, because there are things that you as your human judgment is stronger at discerning than a bot, basically. So while I'm not discouraging using AI, especially for like synthesizing information and analyzing a lot of stuff really quickly, like I'm not saying don't do that. That's also valuable. But this was what you did was pre-AI, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait to tell that to my kids one day.
Right? Yeah. Kids these days will never
I actually
know.
did this stuff before. Like you used to have this thing called a spreadsheet, and like all these different things. So, it's crazy, crazy to even think about these things. But regardless, couldn't agree more. And like the to the win-loss point, like it's a great way to like, PMM, I think struggles oftentimes to like, and I've had the same struggle myself, like earning your seat at the table and like having like the strategic viewpoint in an organization versus like being more of like a marketer or kind of like this no man's land or like enablement. There's all these different things. So win-loss is a great way to like make that more established. So.
Absolutely. It's such a good place to start too. Like I've heard a lot of PMMs want to do voice of customer research and, maybe they don't know what kind of topic they should choose. Always just start with win-loss. It's the lowest hanging fruit. It's easiest to get, buy-in from stakeholders on how you're going to spend your time and how it's going to be valuable and all the good stuff. So, love to echo that. Okay. So when you started to look at some of the data from some of your win-loss analysis, what like started to emerge in terms of trends and like, tell me more about the signals you were seeing with some of that data.
Yeah, I think like there were a few things that really came to mind or like really popped out when we looked at it. I think the first thing is like, and this is like natural as you move up market, but the world isn't just software companies. Like that, you're not like there are the only companies that you can sell to. We started seeing like really strong traction in like, and you can look at it at a surface level, it's like, oh, manufacturing and financial services, but those like have the largest TAM. So like you're naturally going to see more traction in deals in those. But when we like double click, it's like, okay, within there's like sub industries of like medical devices and banking were ones that we actually were knocking down on like customers with. So like by kind of understanding a little further there, like there's more nuance and niche and you can get a lot more specific in your campaigns for like sub industries versus like, hey, like we are, commissioned for manufacturing companies. And like that doesn't change if you're, building tractors versus, like plastic, like soap bottles or whatever it is. So I think that was a really valuable insight. The second was like incumbent solutions. So like, hey, no matter what, and we should always be trying to, and like conversational intelligence makes this so easy today, but like tracking what solutions that companies are on is so valuable to understand like, oh, what are the pains they're seeing? Like, how can we replace them? Why? And like, we identified like one specific software that like as legacy, it was making folks go through a migration and everyone was hating it and like forced to change anyway and re-implement. And that's was like a really big driver of a lot of like both won deals and just at least like inbound for us. So that was another one where it's like, okay, we should be like targeting campaigns at all of these customers of that solution today. And then the third one, I think the persona piece, yeah. Persona looking at like, hey, who's actually leading these evaluations? This just feels like an obvious insight, but like when we had a leader in the like a above the line persona, so like more of a senior persona in the room, like whether it was like a head of finance, a VP, FP&A, like accounting, or even a sales leader, that allowed us, or even ops, like more rarely, but when they were in the room versus having like your sales compensation manager or like your sales commissions analyst who's naturally like was really into like the making this job a lot easier than before, but like what they cared about above the line was just completely different. Like they didn't mind, like a CFO or a VP of finance didn't mind that like commissions was like difficult. That wasn't really like compelling. So I think of a new narrative that didn't just resonate with the persona because they just didn't have organizational sway. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love that insight. That's really helpful. Okay. So there's a collection of signals that you picked up on that were more unique to your enterprise segment as you started to dig in to some of this data. So now tell me a little bit more about, maybe like the biggest things that you learned about like the actual buyers behind some of this. You started to tell me a little bit more with the personas. Is there more to the story there?
Yeah. One of the things like on that persona front, like we have, sales commission analysts, sales comp, like they're oftentimes really focused on just like getting this out on time. It's a grueling, brutal role for any I doubt there are any listening, but sales comp analysts out there, like it's a really grueling role where you're having to sprint at the end of the month or right after end of month to get commissions payments out in a very short amount of time, aggregate all the data that's come down, making sure that Salesforce data is correct, or Salesforce CRM data is in the right place, turn that into your commission outputs based on your plans and issue those out, make sure they're accurate. You're always going to get like clawbacks or like complaints, inquiries from your sellers who don't understand the comp. So you're just like up against it. And like the only time you're really like organizationally like called out is when something goes wrong, which is a tough position to be in. And what we found is those personas, like we really like had success with those early on, and like they exist in these roles, but they weren't really we're getting a lot of inbound, but they weren't driving the deals forward. They were going to be on board no matter what, but how do we convince like the folks above them to say like, hey, this is a organizational strategic challenge that your business is having of like, hey, your reps aren't getting paid on time, or like your reps are like leaving the company because their comp plan, it doesn't stack up with like how others in the industry and stuff like that. Like that is really compelling. And like your incentive structure could actually be optimized to drive towards the new business initiative that you have, like selling this new product, adding services, like breaking into a new industry. Like if you're really thoughtful about commissions and incentives, like that can be a strategic advantage for a go-to-market organization. So we wanted to really lead with a narrative that more aligned with that messaging rather than the messaging that's like, oh, like we'll just make your job easier and get these commissions out on time. So.
Okay. So what I love that it sounds like you did here is you looked at the whole buy team, right? Through this big analysis that you did. Maybe it started with win-loss, but you had all these other, supplemental and additive data sources that you were looking at. But you ultimately got super focused and clear on the full buy team for the enterprise segment and each persona for that buy team. And this is something that I think is so hard to do, is you get really good at like the champion, right? The persona for whom the product was built. And for you talked about like an incentives analyst or something like that, a compensation manager, something like that, right? But, swap that out with whatever. This could be in any business and for any product. But what I think is the really hard part for a PMM is to take the narrative that was so beautifully crafted for that one persona. And as you pointed out, it means meaningless to the person who actually signs at the end of the day in enterprise. And what gets really hard is crafting the narrative that now will resonate with both or with a full buy team. How do you do that? Like can be so difficult. So any other insights you can share around how you thought about that, or did you find like a commonality maybe between those two personas and landed on a narrative that kind of fit both? Like, tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think like one of the things as we like devise the messaging and a lot of this, like I was not going at this alone. We had other PMMs and just like an organization who was really bought into this piece, but like we had really like were talking to folks like across the buyer team. Like you have this like user obsession with like these primary champions, and that's who we work with, but also like getting curious about like those folks higher up in the organization. What we found is that like this narrative in which is really like commissions or incentives as a strategic lever for your business, like starting to like rethink of like, oh, this is just back office, like getting payment out similar to like a pay stub versus like no, incentives are a strategic driver for whatever business objectives you're going up against. That's a C-suite level like value prop. At the end of the day, like the commission analysts were bought in on that too because it makes their function more high value, right? Like they don't want to see themselves as just like, trying to get those commissions payments out. They want to view it as like, oh, I want to see like the trends of like, oh, we're only hitting, 70% of quota or everyone's hitting 110% of quota. That's actually a bad commission plan. Like I need to like advise my team that like, I want to be like looking at like the reporting and analytics and say, oh, this is actually these outliers are not good for us or this trend is not good for us. We should revise our comp plans to support like what makes more sense for the business. And then they become more strategic as well. So I think really everyone organizationally was like bought with this aspirational view of what it should be. How tangible that actually is adopted in organizations is a different story. But I do think that really like was a narrative that we could tell had bite and was going to like be able to like allow us to convince folks to move that way.
I love it. You guys leaned into the aspirational kind of tone, but also reframed, I guess, like the jobs to be done of your primary champion from, basically being like, not rather than saying like, not that you said this because you didn't, but like cog in the machine, you've heard that phrase or similar phrase before, reshaping it to, no, your role can be a strategic asset to the business. And this is how that translates. And that also worked really well with your executive buyer as well. So once you built out this new messaging for the upmarket enterprise segment, how did this start to actually show up for you in like a go-to-market motion?
Yeah. Like the way I see like this is like once you actually have that like messaging in place and done that work, now it's like the fun part, right? Of like, how do you turn this into like readying your both marketing team, like across the board of like demand gen, social content, and then wrangle your sales team too with like speaking the same language, pitching discovery on this new persona, demoing to them, like all, making sure that both of these streams and like your enterprise playbook across the board is like humming. So we did a lot across the board. Like this persona insight was one, and we had this message around like return on incentives or ROI, right? Like you want to get more return out of this. So that was like kind of the catchy, punchy version of it, of thinking like this is a strategic thing. You need to get more return, which is obviously more revenue that you're getting out of the incentives that you're putting forward. And this is done through like really rigorous, like looking into your commissioned plans and structures and analyzing it and not spending time running all your time running the actual calculations. So that was what we leaned to as like a kind of a headline message, but we ran a lot of like mini plays and campaigns out of this too, right? Like we were doing those sub-industry campaigns I mentioned around the medical device space and banking. So like adding landing pages for those, like interviewing customers, getting specific case studies for those. They're starting to like stand up like a full go-to-market bill of materials for that specific space and like slides, then like working with our sales engineers to make sure like the demo talk track woven, like we had like an org for that specific type of industry and like it was built out with plans that reflected their business. So just starting to like build like empathy into your go-to-market motion and small things that can make such a huge difference. And it's not like one particular thing, but really shifting across the board and really setting them up to have more conversations that's going to show up in a way that's going to reflect the audience you're going after, and really like kind of throwing out the old playbook and not just trying to like throw the same thing you've been doing over and over again and had success with yesterday into front of an entirely new different audience. So
yeah. So it sounds like it was both a mix of internal readiness and I don't want to say external readiness, but maybe like external like asset building. So once you launched with all of this, like it sounds like a large volume of work, both in terms of deliverables and the enablement, like you launched it. What happened in the end? What were the results?
yeah. I think you mentioned the big one earlier on, but like being able to 2x that enterprise ARR in that first year with all the campaigns and plays we were running was like really validating. We're starting to see those get knocked down. We had like logos like I think Stiefel, Stripe, Datadog. There was some that, Raymond James Canada was another one. BD, like these really big like Fortune 500 type of companies that were really strong and like great ones for us to hang our hat on and like also continue to like break into those spaces that we'd already seen success in. So that was really exciting and a great way to kind of validate like the hypotheses and like the analysis that we did early on. So that was great to see there.
I love that. Yeah, it's so impressive. Well done. And here's the biggest takeaway for me is your super valuable insight was hiding inside your existing customer base. Like you didn't have to go do some massive, third-party research or, you didn't have to spend thousands of dollars with an analyst to try to figure out what do enterprises want? You knew, and because you followed the signal and then you built a repeatable system around it. So now what I would like to do is turn this into a playbook. Because I'm sure, as we pointed out in the beginning, like I personally have my own move up market story, and I bet hundreds to thousands of PMMs out there are in the thick of it right now. And this would be a very helpful playbook for them. So coach me on this one. What's the first step in this playbook if I wanted to try to mimic your success?
Yeah, I like to think of a lot of like PMM work and like being encapsulated, or at least the approach should be thought like repeatable in a way that is under like the same framework. And I've like coined this with like a 4 Rs. I need to put like a LinkedIn article or blog or Substack out there eventually. But my 4 Rs framework, which is starting with your research. So really understanding the market, then you're refining that research. So like, okay, of all my findings, what are the insights? And then like, what is my messaging, positioning strategy, right? You're taking those inputs and refining them, then readying. So I mentioned this, like obviously you think about like enablement as like the classic form of this, but I also think like readying your marketing team to go out and like push top of funnel around this. So like what type of like webinars or events should we attend, or like content should we run? Like that's still like readying that team with the insights, messaging, positioning to do that. And then even your post-sale adoption or CX, however you're framing that organization, making sure they are ready to take on new customers that reflect that new strategy and thing that you're pushing towards. And lastly, report. So like how did we succeed? Where are there room for optimization? Where are there maybe like hints and signals of success that we can double down on. So really like having that analytical like look back where you can start to predict where you're headed next. So that's really just that research, refine, ready, report is how I like to think about it.
I love this as a marketer. I love a good alliterative framework. So good. Okay. So basically this is your playbook, right? These are your 4 steps. Step 1, research. Step 2, refine. Step 3, ready. And step 4, report. So I want to put a little bit more, you summarized already, but I want to put a little bit more action into some of these for the PMMs out there, or just like a quick like definition. So if your step 1 is research, like just give a good like definition of that for me, or maybe like bullet point list out like some must-haves for the research phase.
Yeah. I always think like research is like best done, like it's like a simple, everyone knows, but like qual and quant is both so important. Like everyone, like a lot of folks are like, oh, like we should just go like, run like analysis of like our Salesforce data. And like now it's easier than ever with AI, you can do that. But to your point earlier, like there's so much value that can be derived from qualitative conversations, like going out and speaking to a champion, like asking them what's working, what's not, and like really like double clicking into the questions or hypotheses that you have, testing what you have. I think that's so critical today, especially in like this over AI world. Like the more you can get in real life and like IRL and just like start to like talk and understand where someone's at, like that is so impactful. Also another like hack, like I love conversational intelligence tools like Gong, we use Attention, like now at Unify, like they are so valuable for me to just be like, I can query an agent and say like, tell me like, of calls with enterprise companies, like what are the most common like 10 pain points that have come up, like aggregated across calls. And like that used to be like us just like going out there and like combing through like calls or like asking an experienced salesperson. And like the fact that you can be so much faster and actually so much more like precise is like really helpful. So it's unbelievable. So I actually like can't even imagine like the world like it's crazy.
Kids these days don't know.
They don't know how hard. But I think it's a good thing long term that we'll have like, oh, like we've seen it done and we know how we got there. So we have the ability to like, I think that's why I'm busier than I ever have been, but like I'm also like I'm more productive than I've ever been, but I also am like working more than I ever have. And it's because I'm like, oh wow, I can go do all this stuff that used to take me like a month in like a week or a couple of days. So a very interesting time we're in, but.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. It's not slowing down either.
No.
Okay. So I love this for the step one for research. And I just want to throw out there one more time that the win-loss program is such a good, like just always on, it should be an always on program. You know, that's something you shouldn't stop doing. So, okay. All right. So then step two was refine. So if I've done step one, I've done my research, I have both qualitative and quantitative. So what do I do with this step two with refine?
Yeah. Like usually like when like I've like run analysis, you're like turning that into like some sort of like a readout, even if just like to like aggregate the information or like consolidate the information in a way that makes sense of like, okay, like here's what I went out and did, and here's like the key insights across these different
findings. Yeah.
Some of the findings, of course. Yeah. So what did you find in this analysis? What are those critical things? And then like starting to piece that together. If like, okay, if we know X, Y, Z about like our enterprise buyers, like we know they value flexibility. We know that like the executive, like they've been like they're in like long-term contracts with like these tools that they hate or whatever it is. And like, oh, like, you know, the executives are the only ones who are actually going to like move the needle here. Like, how does that inform how we message and position? Like, and really, okay, well, then we know like this is the splice of the market that like our positioning, like this is like the perfect competitor, like incumbent or like profile of organization that we want to go after, like your ICP in that sense, the personas that make that up and like really start to like, really like sharpen how you view the market and who you're going after, and then like turn that into, okay, like we believe this is who we're going after. Here's what is about them and here's what we can offer them. Okay, like now let's like do kind of like the more fun part of like, how do we message to them in a way that's compelling and like start to like both in a way that's like really clear, but also like that's punching, biting, like grabs you and like really will resonate with that persona. And then like also taking that to make sure you put it in front of some folks, which is the critical step that's easy to skip, but like not only just like, you know, sharing it with the executive team and getting nods, but like really, and this makes it easier to go to the executive team too and say like, hey, I had 10 conversations with like leading like VPs of finance and like this, they all agreed that this is the most compelling narrative and thing for us to do. It gives you so much more gravitas because like messaging, as you, I'm sure you know, but as better than anyone now, like it's like so hard because everyone has
so hard.
No one's right? Like it's just like a very difficult thing that is so apparent, it's so known and out there, and like so wrangling, like the more you can like back it up with like, hey, I've actually gone out and got feedback on this, adapted and learned and like apply that back. This can be really helpful. So
I love it. I'm gonna call out a few things because the refine step is loaded. There's a lot to do in your step two of refine because now you've done all the research, but you're turning it into a kind of like a findings readout report for your stakeholders. But then as part of that, you're kind of building the strategy along with it because you're matchmaking your findings with the opportunity and what basically your product capabilities and how that's going to show up in terms of messaging. And you're also saying, and by the way, we've already done this message testing for this new messaging. Here are the findings of that too. So it's a lot to do in the refine step, but I think it's good that it all happens together in the same step because it's a very natural way to do all of that activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Such a critical one too, right? Like that is like PMM's like opportunity to shine is in that refine pillar, right? Like everything
yeah.
like, other functions are doing, but like PMM's ability to like shape and sculpt and like carve out
Yes.
life and actually turn that into something that's going to resonate is like, I think it can be a superpower for PMMs if you can get it right. So
Totally, totally. I'm gonna shamelessly plug a couple of my other podcast episodes here that I think will be super helpful for a PMM. So one is Kevin from Fleetio. His case study is actually he worked at a company called HIMSS for a little bit, the healthcare conference everyone's familiar with. Yeah.
yeah.
So he in his like case study he talked about how he did this like message testing kind of like workshop with executives and stakeholders, and just his method for that was really helpful. So I just want to like shout out to anyone who maybe like wanting to, as part of their refine step, do like a little like messaging workshop with your stakeholders. That was a really good one. Another one is earlier on in our conversation, you mentioned doing like you mentioned competitive alternatives. And I don't know if that would be part of your step 1 or step 2. Like, I don't know if that would be part of your research step. I think maybe it would be. So this should be a plug for like the step 1 in the research. I have another podcast episode with, her name's Mindy from Klaviyo. She built a repeatable system for exactly what you described, Quintin, as like looking at the pains of your competitors and building like a system around how you speak to those pains from a competitive objection handling, basically. So I think like maybe the research bit obviously happens in your step 1, but maybe as part of your refine, when you're starting to build out some of that messaging and you're considering those alternatives, those competitive alternatives, like as you already pointed out, and I'm validating what you said with another professional in the business, she does it the same way. So plug for Mindy from Klaviyo. That's another really good episode.
Yeah, Kevin and Mindy, I'll have to check both of those out. That sounds incredible. The messaging workshops are awesome. I think like that's such a good way. Like again, the messaging thing, like the hardest part of messaging is getting buy-in. Like that's like will always like
it really is so true. That's how it gets watered down.
Yeah.
And you can build out this perfect messaging that's so good for your buyers and the buy team, and then you get some executive coming in.
Yeah, and those workshops, like which I don't do enough of, and I think they're so like they obviously like you have to get everyone on the calendar and take their top like they're expensive like meetings with like a time standpoint. But the fact that you can get everyone agreeing and like also just be part of the journey of like, hey, we started here, this is what we said. Based on what we said, here's where we ended up. Like that allows it to like all connect and like have less room to like continue to like spur like iterate or just like provide feedback throughout that process. So
yeah, I think what's really beneficial for you is that just as a founding PMM, I'm making a few assumptions here. Maybe this is all wrong and maybe it's more like varies from situation to situation, but you probably already had a lot of more trust and I guess like not necessarily autonomy is not what I'm trying to say, but that trust and faith from your executive leadership that maybe you don't have to do quite as much hand holding with like some of those messaging workshops because you guys are probably already so tight that you're working together so frequently anyway. And they're probably also just by nature of being at a startup, very close to some of the work too. So I'm guessing that it's not quite as difficult to get some of the messaging buy-in. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I agree. Like it's always like a difficult task. I sit next to my CEO right now, so like I like that.
Yeah.
So that's exactly where we're at. But I totally agree. And like I think like obviously like bigger organizations will like bring in a big expensive like agency and then they're like, tell us about your business, and like they go through these like long expensive cycles. And so like having someone ingrained and who's seen it like also just like has a good feel for like how like your founders and your leadership team see your business and how you sell and all those different things, and also just like leaning into your sharpest like field folks too, like whether that's a CSM who sees it like our some successful customers, or like a sales rep who just like really has it and like gets it and their message lands way better than everyone else, like that continues to validate your work. So
100%. Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. I don't want to get too far off track.
Okay.
So your step 1 was research. Your step 2 was to refine. And now step 3 is to ready. And like some of this is like enablement. Like what are the other like just quick out actions that I should take for the step 3 ready?
Yeah, I think you should just view these as like 3 different like layers, right? So you have your like marketing lens that you're taking for this. So like it depends on whatever initiative you're running, but like in this enterprise push, right, we're gonna like want to run full scale campaigns. In like I'm like been fortunate, I'll work with like a demand gen leader, growth leader, like as a partner on that front of like, okay, here's our persona, messaging, ICP, like here's what we want to do, here's some ideas, like let's get together, like you can come take that and like come back with like campaign ideas. We can work together on. I'll work on what the messaging is, and like you're going to actually think about what are the channels this is going to be most successful in, what are the tactics we're going to execute on, and then go out and execute those. So that's like a pairing, like you do that across, social, paid, like webinars, content, events, like all those different things. Like you're working with them to like take what you're doing and translate it into something marketing facing that's going to help you drive the right leads and like really build a reputation, that new segment, audience, vertical, say whatever you're going after. So that's the piece on the marketing side. Then you have your sales, right? Of like, okay, what does the new playbook look like? And you have to have a salesperson come with you on this journey. Like I've done a lot of sales enablement, and like making sure that you have like one of your best sellers or a sales manager who's trusted, like working with you to build these things. So you're not just like the PMM who comes in and tells like a sales team how to sell when they go and take it on the chin every day. It's never going to resonate. It's never going to like move the group. So you need like a champion in the room with you who's actually going to like train on the demo, and you're going to be like, I'm color commentary about like, hey, this is the industry we run after. Like now they're, going to work, Al, my sale, like enterprise AE who's had a ton of success, is going to show you how you would demo to a medical device company, like, and like the nuance change in messaging that like happens. So
good.
Yeah. Like that's really the key piece with sales. And then like you have your like, I see it's like pitch, disco, demo, like all those pieces, getting that right is super critical. Lastly, on your like post-sale side, just making sure that they have everything they need, that like speak the same language, know the type of companies that are going to be coming in, and they are ready to support them, implement, like continue to like, what are they trying to achieve as success? And like, how does that change from like historically how you've talked to folks? Terminology is super key. If it's going to be like new styles of businesses, and making sure it doesn't feel like, oh, like this person knows nothing about how my business works and isn't a trusted consultant for us. So yeah, making sure all 3 of those teams feel equipped and ready to take on the strategy you've done. Because if any of it falls off, like you really like, it's a lot of that work is going to be for nothing. So super critical.
Totally. Okay. So the 3 layers for the ready step are marketing, sales, and customer success or / support teams. Makes perfect sense. Okay. So bring us home with step 4 of report.
Yes, report. This one's obvious, but you're really just looking back at how performance did. And I think those 3 channels are the same way I like to look at this. So like, okay, because if, for example, if you're having success, which is like our goal was like to close $1 million in revenue in this new vertical as an example. Like if you didn't achieve that, like you can't just point at sales, you can't just point at market, like you have to really like uncover like what went wrong or what went right, honestly. So like, were the campaigns we were running successful? Did the goals we set out to achieve get achieved? So on like the content piece of the webinar, like the event, like what was like well engaged and what should we continue to double down on versus what isn't working, or is none of it working and we need to like go back to the drawing board and figure that out. Same with the sales side of like, oh, our win rate is just way lower than it's been. Like maybe I'm seeing in sales calls, they're not adopting the new talk track. Like, oh, we need to make sure like we retrain or like enforce this in like a really positive way. Or like they're actually not seeing success and they're churning out. And like maybe there's a product problem. We need to feed back to the product team, or like we need to like help them like equip better our CSMs to like handle these conversations. So really like, and that's more of like a qualitative way of like, okay, what's happening, but really starting to like look at what your goals were across all those different channels, seeing how you stood up, and then like double clicking based on like either where you're really seeing success or really not seeing success can really be is the way that like I approach those.
So good. I like all the different like angles that you're looking at for reporting too. So one thing that I've noticed is that AI is like obviously incredibly good at like finding patterns and but deciding which patterns still feels like superhuman, right? And I'm curious how much you agree with that. And then also how you think AI could be changing or enhancing part of your playbook.
Yeah. This like the pattern thing is so interesting of like being able to like analyze data is such a one, like it's a skill like I like had to learn of like for like these like segmentation analysis and like probably not my like historical skill set. I didn't go in to get like a finance degree and like be on all my time in spreadsheets. So it was a learning curve to get there, but like learned a lot of that. But the fact that now I can like say like, okay, I want to look at like based on the deals we've won, what were the leading persona, and like I can like get that data right away is like so invaluable and so fast as like an insight and like one that you want to continually build like systems to like have that always on of like surfacing trends in your closed loss data as an example, closed won, closed loss data like over time, not to be ignored is to continue to do those win-loss interviews. But regardless, you should still be identifying those like with AI, like having the system set up is super critical there. I do agree though, like that's where like the shift is of like, okay, like they're going to show me the trends of like, oh, like, 20%, like we're only win like 5% of deals when like the champion is like a sales compensation manager. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, like we need to like move, like we need to change our strategy to go after these personas that like connect the dots of like, oh, we need like the executive buyer in the room. And that's something that PMM from your context, from your like experience that you can say like, oh, wow, this trend, that to me tells me this. Let me go out and quickly just like double click and do a few things and understand a bit more and like be curious. And like we can still use AI for some of that like follow on analyses, but like you're the one that's like making hypotheses and like, oh, like connecting the dots on these things that like AI naturally isn't going to do. And like you're going to read out like, oh, this like insight without like direction is just like, it's like kind of useless. So like you're the one that like takes that and points it where it needs to go. So
yeah, totally. Your judgment, your opinion, your discernment, your empathy, those are things that you can't rely on AI for. Sure. Okay. So you're now at Unify, and this is basically your kind of second time being this founding PMM at a startup. What parts of this playbook are you using for Unify, and anything you'd like change or swap out?
Yeah, I still would say I use most of this of like that approach. I think like being like research forward and then like taking time to like refine those insights into something compelling and like readying the teams and reporting on success. The things I will call out is that the timeline of those has like just being in a startup has like gone from like months long or quarter long projects to like weeks long or days long.
So
like,
you've got AI now. You're
exactly.
good.
So now it's so much easier. So I do think that's been like the biggest shift rather than the process itself of like, okay, like let's go look at trends to see like where there's opportunity that we're missing out on. Like, okay, great. Like we've looked at this, like, okay, let's like, what is our positioning for that? Like going after it. So we're even working on like a big launch now of like, okay, understanding our buyers and like how are we refining it. And then how are we, we have like a bunch of enablement sessions next week. So a lot of this stays the same, but like the biggest thing that's changed is the time, your capabilities and the timelines. But yeah, we'll just continue to like be the human in like the room and like, don't let yourself get lazy. Like I find myself doing this a lot where you're just like, it would be easy just to like take what I'm found and like put it in a doc and kind of keep going. But like the more you like with AI, right? Like that just makes it easy. Like there's like a laziness epidemic that's going to be created out of this, that like your opportunity to be like, I'm not only like AI, but I'm also just like, I'm like almost like its own like manager where I'm like taking everything that's showing me and being like, oh, like here's my feedback or here's like my insight and like let's turn that into a plan and like really like being like a partner that way rather than just like, oh, letting it do the work for me and like let it, because it's not going to have that like intellect that you have from being a PMM for years. And like that's the advantage like you still have in your career, like against AI.
Exactly.
Keep your job as like your experience and your context and those different pieces. So that's what I
love that.
yeah. So that's kind
I
of
love that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, your experience and your context. I love this. Okay, last question for you, Quintin, on this topic. What's one piece of advice you have for a PMM who is currently trying to move up market, working at a startup?
Yeah. I think the big thing for me, like throw away everything you know. I think it's an important thing of like, the way we just said how important experience as a contractor is. I
I know,
don't mean
right?
it in that sense. But what I mean is like, hey, your old playbooks aren't going to work. Like just because you succeeded with this here and had a ton of success doesn't mean it's going to work like over here. And like that is like a really hard thing to like accept sometimes of like, oh, we're like, oh, but like this is like a track record. Like I'm a really successful rep and like I'm not going to change my ways because I've seen success. So like not only yourself, but also just like getting folks to buy into that shift is like super crucial to having success with these things. So I think like that's one of the first pieces, like both like yourself of like, hey, like if you were starting from scratch and like joining as a PMM to like with that specific initiative, almost as like a contractor or hired gun, take that lens so that you don't get like caught up in like, oh, like my biases or like I like what like the best reps are saying and like start anew and see kind of how that treats you. I think that's really really important thing. And like it's easy to like bias towards what's worked versus like, okay, I'm gonna need to do things entirely different. So that's definitely what I would advise on that front.
Love it. Thank you so much. This is such a helpful playbook and perspective. And I am definitely going to use your 4R framework of research, refine, ready, and report.
Awesome.
So helpful. Okay. Yes. All right. So now it's time for the next segment of our show. This is the messaging critique. This is where we as product marketing experts get to analyze real world messaging. And the fun part is, Quintin, you as the guest of my show get to pick the company that we look at. Some quick ground rules. You're going to pick a company, ideally one that you feel like you know the target audience really well. You're going to tell me what stands out to you as really working really well with messaging, something you wish the PMM would have considered differently. And then we're going to iterate on how they can take it to the next level. So without further ado, please reveal the company that we'll be looking at today.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at Profound.
Okay.
For folks who aren't familiar,
Is it Profound.ai?
Such a good question. I'm looking at it. I think it's tryprofound.com.
Oh, tryprofound.com. Okay, Okay. Just for folks who want to follow along.
Yes. So Profound is an AEO GEO, which is a new answer engine optimization. Is like the new hot phrase in like the AI world. So basically,
Yes.
about it is like, how do you optimize for people who are searching in Chat or Claude or Perplexity, wherever they're going to do what they would usually do in Google? How do you make yourself one of the vendors when they ask, oh, I need a new privacy tool for my business, or I need a new like tractor for my farm, like whatever that you're going in there to look for, like they are a company that helps you show up within those LLMs, which is really powerful. And
so powerful.
So.
Okay, so tell me, walk us through who their target audience is and like what stood out to you about their messaging.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up, we use them at Unify. They're
great.
We've been. I'm actually not. I've gone access and gone in once or twice, but we actually have a growth engineer on our team, which is interesting, who owns the platform, who's really smart, I would consider him like almost like a go-to-market engineer who's
so cool
and building this kind of thing. So definitely a new world role and like skill set. Sorry, I forget where I was going with
that. So who walk us through their like target audience? It sounds like maybe like growth marketer maybe could be the actual target audience, but then like talk us through the actual messaging and like what's working really well with it.
Yeah, so who Profound sells to is, partially they're like creating their own new roles, but really I think the focus, like as you like look more like classically in organization, like content teams, PR, brand, like folks that are like helping you like show up with your content in those like any sort of SEO analysts probably will be moving, like having this under their purview going forward. Growth marketers is another one that's definitely like search optimization. Any of those types of roles, digital marketer even could kind of fall into that world.
Yeah. And then if we look at their messaging, so I'm on their website right now, tryprofound.com, and I see kind of like a maybe like a rotating, they have marketing agents to win, and then it rotates out the different LLMs, or I guess like at least like the top most popular ones. And then it says reach millions of consumers who are using AI to discover new products and brands.
Yeah.
What's standing out to you about their
Yeah. And honestly, it's funny. This is like the same thing that stood out to me about like, and so like, I'm in SF, I'm looking by like tech billboards every single day. And like, as a PMM, I'm I'm actually like interested in these things. And like, I'm like entertained.
Always critiquing, right?
Of course, I like want to start a LinkedIn series about this eventually, but people hate them. And like, that's a whole nother like can of worms of like people hate the AI billboards. But regardless, what I like about, they have stood out to me around like this key point of clarity. Like, I think their messaging is some of like the clearest. Like, they aren't trying to do too much. I think like there's like a spectrum in messaging of like punchiness and like creativity and like clarity. And I really think they do an excellent job of just being explicitly clear about something that's really, really new, really complex, new, like you have to like educate the entire market on what this concept is. They are doing that in a way that's very just like, hey, this is explicitly what we do. We help marketing agents to win in Microsoft Copilot. Like, okay, like, yeah, that like piques my interest of like, okay, you are going to help me show up in, or like help me win in those LLMs or specific tools. So that like is something that's consistently in some of their just ads and stuff has like impressed me on those fronts.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what's working now? What do you think is then maybe room for improvement on some of this?
Yeah, I would just say like to that point of like that spectrum of like creativity and like clarity, like there's probably a room to be like more like punchy potentially on some of their branding of like we like even just like a strong like manifesto POV of like the future of like, for example, like I think, and I'm scrolling through the page, they might have some of this, but like so much of search today is naturally just shifting from Google and historical sources to LLMs, and there's probably like a arbitrage opportunity to like be showing up in LLMs right now in a way that like will not exist in 5 years. Like everyone will probably have this figured out. It'll be part of like the generic marketing approach. So this is like a new channel that you can go out and like be kind of like this sneaky lever for you to like have success in the market. So I would say like leaning more into like that of like this like, oh, whoa, like they're changing like the way like they're like on the forefront of like how marketing is going to shift. I think there's probably an opportunity for that, but they might be doing that in other channels and like maybe like founder-led marketing and stuff like that. But
definitely.
Yeah, but I think there's probably an opportunity to continue to do that here too.
And then how would you take it to the next level? Like if you are kind of on the ground floor and like taking the good parts of their messaging and like maybe iterating or bringing it to the next level, maybe even implementing some of your playbook, how would you coach them on this to really take it up a notch?
Yeah, I think like a thing that would probably be interesting to understand. I'm just like curious about that. Like just as a marketer, I'm very curious about like how they're thinking about this role doesn't exist. And I think they introduced like a similar to like Clay, like they have like a marketing engineer or content engineer title that they're like leaning into right now. But naturally, like not a lot of those exist in the world like today. So like, how are you thinking about is obviously as you're thinking about growing an enterprise, you're going to have to sell to existing people who haven't done this before and aren't doing this today. So how do you convince like those folks to go out and use a tool and do a practice that they've never thought about or done before, and that you're the one to do it with them, like, and take them on this journey. So I think it takes a lot of like, it'll probably take a lot of education, and I'm sure they're doing a lot of really good work of this. I know like two of our team attended like a conference that they had a while back and said it was really awesome. But yeah, on that specific point, like as I imagine would be going up market, I would like go out and have like conversations with like established digital content, like marketing, SEO, like whatever like niche of the marketing organization, like I don't want to say legacy, but like maybe current state marketing organization, how might view this, who they think should own it, who's really best fit for it, what skill sets they need, what about their product like resonates today versus doesn't, and like how do you make like, because it continues to evolve both your messaging and your product and positioning to serve not only this like new audience that you're creating, but also this like aspirational, like, hey, this is where our business is going, and like we need a message that's going to resonate with those folks too.
Yeah, I really like the aspirational angle. And I think that mirrors to, what you were thinking when you guys were kind of moving up market and, rethinking your narrative. So, okay, profound, very cool. Shout out to any profound PMMs. You've got some fans, and also Quintin has some really good ideas for you. So check it out.
Very impressive stuff over there. So they're doing great.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love it. Okay. So Quintin, one thing I like to make space for in this podcast is a moment of gratitude. Because in product marketing or marketing in general, none of us get to where we are in our careers without learning from each other. So just a big, genuine thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your expertise on the show. I really appreciate it. And then I'd also love to turn around to you and give you an opportunity to shout out some PMMs who have made a really big impact on your career and brought you to this moment to where you are in your career today.
Awesome. And thank you for that. Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. It's been fun to go through this process with you. I love what you're doing for PMMs out there. I think it's going to be it's kind of like a niche role and sometimes isolated role in an organization. So creating community around this, I think, is super important. And so I love the work you're doing. So keep it up.
Of course. Thank you. Yeah. Let's hear those PMMs.
Yeah, gosh. So let's get them together. But the one I'll give a shout out to, there's so many great ones in my life. So shout out to all of the PMMs in my world. But one who actually is departed the PMM world actually is now entirely departed to a different industry. But regardless, Ani Golovko is her name. She was our director of PMM for a while at CaptivateIQ, and she has brought this really strategic, methodical, data-driven approach. She came from the biz ops world and really brought on that research side of PMM.
The quantitative, qualitative. I love that.
On that Reading world for so long, and she really was really a big proponent of in order to establish PMM and make yourself a strategic player in a team, you really have to be data driven and curious and uncovering rocks and analyzing and doing these things without AI. So I've learned so much from her. It was really she was a really great manager, leader, and we had so have so much appreciation for that. So shout out to Ani.
Oh, I love that. It's so good to have those mentors and coaches who are in the data with you and kind of coaching on how to look at it and view it. So good. Okay. Last question for you. Where else is it best to access your expertise? Is it just best to find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't have a source for my knowledge or expertise yet. Feel free to connect with whatever knowledge and expertise I can offer. But yeah, happy to connect with folks. I'm always interested in talking product marketing. So yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Sounds good. Again, thank you so much, Quintin. This was so good. And hey, PMM listeners, if you like this episode, please share it with a PMM friend. And I would be so grateful if you would leave a review. It helps tremendously with our reach. Thank you so much for coming on this adventure with us today. I hope this episode leaves you with inspiration to take in the next step of your own journey.